Hello, everyone, and welcome. Since today's guest comes from Africa, I'd like to reprise a blooper that I gave in the early part of our podcast series, which is an article that appeared in a Nairobi newspaper. And it said very simply, a new swimming pool is rapidly taking shape since the contractors have thrown in the bulk of their workers. So with that, and as illustrating the misuse of words there, I'd like to introduce today's guest, who is Dr. Komi S. Klu. Dr. Komi S. Klu is currently the Chairman and Chief Risk Officer of EMIGROUP, Emerging Markets Invest Group, which works in 30 African markets. He is a well-respected financial services executive and investment facilitator with over 20 years of proven success in promoting financial and operational efficiency for large global financial institutions. These include Capital One Finance and HSBC Bank, where he has held management positions overseeing corporate due diligence, risk management, and claims processing operations. Currently, as Chief Investment and Risk Officer of EMIGROUP, Komi is providing leadership and consulting services, assisting African companies in building solutions for large-scale complex challenges to mitigate risks and drive investment growth and opportunities. Komi has earned a reputation for the innovative and strategic leadership he brings to the financial services industry, as well as to global humanitarian initiatives. He is currently board chairman of Wafi Capital SA, a private equity firm operating in West Africa and raising funds from investors in North America and Europe. Komi is based in Dover, Delaware, and makes frequent trips to his native Ghana. Welcome, Komi. I'm delighted that you can join us today.
It's an honor and a pleasure to join you today.
Thank you so much. So I ask each guest when we start, if you could please give me a bit of your background of how you got to the position where you are, your education, your experience to get you to the exalted positions that you currently hold.
Okay, that's a great question. But before we dive into presenting and introducing myself,
yes,
let me preface that by saying that this is a unique and a special timing for Africa and for African business. Because this week, President Biden is hosting 50 plus African presidents and head of states in Washington, D.C. Started last night and is going to end this Friday. So this is the right time to talk about doing business with Africa from the US, where we are based currently. Now, let me talk about myself. My name is Komi, and I'm African. I was born in Africa, and I went to school. I started my education in Africa. Then I moved to Europe. I went to law school in France at a very prestigious university called Bordeaux Law School. It's in the south of France, Bordeaux, the wine country. So after that, I came to the US, where I did another graduate study. And soon after graduation, in the US, I did my formal education at Widener University, which is on Route 95 south of Philadelphia, in a town called Chester, Pennsylvania. So I did another graduate studies there. In '98, after my graduation, I started working. I started working in corporate banking, then moved to global banking. And I have had the privilege and the honor to work in multiple countries on multiple continents. And that's what gave me the exposure and the knowledge about global business. That's what gave me the taste to venture into global business.
That's fascinating. And thank you for telling our audience about the wonderful summit that President Biden is hosting this week. And this is December 2022, by the way, for those of you who are listening. And that's really excellent. President Bush actually started a major initiative for American companies to invest in Africa, and I believe lowering the trade barriers for African companies to export to the United States. And it's wonderful that President Biden is continuing that initiative as well in his own way. Tell me about perhaps the most important, not the most important, but the most receptive countries for American investment or for foreign investment, whether it's American or European, in Africa.
Okay, that's a tricky question. All African countries have the appetite for what we call FDI, foreign direct investments. So because we are now building the African continent, we need investment in infrastructure, in everything, and from food processing, production, to mining, and to infrastructure. So all African countries have a high, insatiable appetite for foreign investment, for American dollars investment. However, they are not all good. They are not all created equal. Just to put it so simple, there are some countries that offer better investment and business climate than others. Countries like Rwanda, everybody is aware of it. They have built a very attractive doing business climate there. Countries like Ghana are still attractive because of their political stability and the business climate. Even though Ghana is undergoing some financial challenges today, which are related to the currency and the heavy debt that the country is carrying, foreign debt. But overall, Ghana is also a very good investment destination. By the way, we are getting ready to publish our top 10 investment destination in Africa for 2023. Once it is ready, Philip, you'll be the first person we can share it with. Okay. So you can share it with your audience.
Very good. So we can't release that yet, can't release that wonderful information yet. We'll keep our audience waiting.
Okay.
For that. That's excellent. What advantages does Africa offer that most Americans overlook?
Oh, yeah. The advantages that Africa offer that most of Americans overlook is opportunities with big O. There are a lot of opportunities. The growth opportunities is there. So Africa, excuse my French, but Africa, when it comes to investment, Africa is still considered as a virgin land. There's a lot that we need to do there. So, so your potential for growth is much higher. You can multiply your ROI, your return on investment, by 10 times, which you cannot get here in the US. But most US investors, when they look at Africa, they look at Africa through the media lens. What the big media houses, CNN, Fox News, they have shown about Africa. That's what they keep in mind. So they don't know that Africa has a lot of business opportunities and can offer them a very healthy return on their investment. That's what Americans overlook.
That's excellent. So that's the primary criterion.
Yes.
You're saying.
Yes.
Now, in a similar way, the challenges for entering the African market are perhaps 10 times more difficult as well. I'm thinking primarily of the most common ones, which most people are aware of, which are both the lack of infrastructure as well as corruption. And I'd like you to please address those two issues to persuade people that those are not those are challenges that can be overcome.
Oh yes, yes. It is not more difficult to do business in Africa than it is to do in the US. Let me give you a few points. For instance, today in Rwanda, you can create your company within 24 hours online without visiting any office. In Delaware, where I'm based, you can do the same thing within 24 hours. So you see the ease of doing business is at the same level. You can do the same thing in Togo. You can do the same thing in Ghana. So the bureaucracy is coming down. The bureaucratic girdles are coming down in Africa. Now, yes, what you said was true, I think 15 or 10 years ago, but not anymore. A lot of African countries have put their business registration process online thanks to the power of technology. So things are changing in Africa. However, there are still challenges. As a risk professional, I would be disingenuous if I do not say that there are still challenges in Africa. Number one, poor infrastructure. Yes, we are still building the continent. We are still building our economy. So our infrastructures are poor. They are not up to par yet. So we are still working on them. But African governments and leaders have to do a better job by building sustainable and reliable infrastructure. Now you see a lot of roads, a lot of new buildings popping up across Africa, but sometimes those are not built to last. And this is due to the corruption. Okay, let me address the corruption problem. Yes, Africa has the perception of being a highly corrupt continent, meaning African countries have the show or portray a, a perception of being corrupt. Yes, there are a lot of business dealings that are not legal or moral. For instance, if you give a contract to a road builder to build the roads in any ABC African country, if that road builder were a local, he or she may be pressured by the government authorities that give them these contracts to do some kickback. I'm not sure if that is still the practice of the day, but that has been how business has been done in Africa in the past. So you will see some new infrastructure, some new roads that are built, which are not built with the strongest material, with the better material due to the corruption. Now, I do understand that with the help of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, Africans are putting some better structure, some governance around the way they assign public markets and public contracts. If that project come to fruition, then I will say that the corruption in government projects, assignment and administration will be reduced. I think that's the biggest area where people refer to Africa as a corrupt continent.
That's very, very interesting. Can you discuss the role of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which Congress passed years ago in this country, in the United States, to prevent American companies from bribery, from giving bribes to officials to attract business.
Yes.
I believe the European Union has done something similar.
Yes. Now, speaking to American investors, anybody who is an American citizen or investor who wants to do business anywhere in the world need to know about the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act. And sometimes we refer to it simply as Anti-Bribery Act. The Anti-Bribery Act prevents any American companies or American citizens to engage in illegal quid pro quo, giving something in order to get a contract or to win a market. That is illegal. So what we advise our clients to do is, first of all, to be aware of the requirement of the act and to be aware of the fact that no matter where their action take place, being they are in Ghana, they are in Nigeria, they are in South Africa, as long as they are US citizen or they represent a US company, if they engage in any illegal activity, they will have to answer to the law in court. So the US government will come after them. It is illegal. It doesn't matter what you do, because people are under the impression that, oh, these acts just apply to anything that happened on the US continent or on the US territory. That's not true. As a US citizen, you are bound by that. Now, the way you manage it is when you meet your partners or you meet your business contacts in Africa, it is important that they do understand that your business ethics, it doesn't have anything to do. You don't have to even cite or call the act. Say, this is the way we do business. You have to present it to them. So that everything that we do with you has to be transparent. Meaning, if you ask me to give you 10% before or after you give me a contract, or you ask me to pay some money to your Swiss bank accounts, I'm not going to do it, because we do not believe in that. We don't do business. And more, the African government and especially the African private sector business leaders do respect those investors who abide by the law and who want to be transparent in their business dealings. Nobody respects any criminal. Let me put it this way. Nobody respects the criminals. So if you go and you set a high standard and tell them, here are the standard by which my company will operate in your country, people do respect you in the end. You might lose, let me be frank, you might lose one or two markets, you might lose one or two contracts, but in the end, you come out as a winner.
That's fascinating. You mentioned that, of course, Americans should take the high road, in essence, saying that that's not the way we do business, and we're legally bound not to give bribes, so forth. The Chinese, however, are not bound by these rules, and they do business with any autocrat, any dictator, anyone, anywhere, regardless of the human rights violations or anything. They don't care about that. So how can American and European companies compete against the Chinese, for example, and officials who would very much welcome a kickback?
That's a good question, and I touched on it briefly. My question uh, uh, um, to my contacts and my partners is: are you engaged in the race to the bottom, or are you running the race to the top?
Mm.
And the answer is clear. You cannot be competing with somebody who is doing something illegal, and you know that the thing that they're doing is illegal, and you want to compete with them. We should not be, we as Americans should not be engaged in a race to the bottom. No. Okay. So when you go to a country, like I said, you need to tell them, they need to know your moral standing. And you need to tell them that you are always going to take the high road. Now, like I said, you can lose one or two contracts to a Chinese or to another competitor from Turkey. I mean, Turkey is big now in Africa too. People only talk about China, but Turkey is doing big things also in Africa. You can lose one or two contracts to them, but in the end, it's because we have the rule of law. It's because we have the anti-bribery acts in America. You can ask anybody across the globe, when it comes to business, people still respect the Americans.
Mm.
The American brand is still there. The Chinese brands, people know they can get quick money from them, but I don't think that it has the same brand value like the American brand. This is testament to the way we do business. So anybody who wants to be successful in Africa, who is there in the long run, who want to build a sustainable business in Africa, is advised, highly advised, I might add, to play by the rules. They'll be successful in the end.
And it's very encouraging. And I very much like that expression, the race to the bottom. I would call it race to the bottom of the sewer.
Yes.
It certainly happens here as well in certain cases in this country. The Chinese are also known for not hiring African locals on the infrastructure projects they build. They bring in their own workers, their own people, of course, and that doesn't really benefit Africa in the long run. It benefits, it benefits in the short term, of course, but in the long run, they're not training people in the skills that they would need to advance.
Yes.
Do you find that the Turkish companies, the Russian companies, other foreign investors, do they also do the same practice? Do they also import their own national workers, or do they hire local Africans?
No, that practice is just prevalent with the Chinese companies.
It's Chinese.
Yeah, mostly. And now the Russians, I don't see them doing any business for that much, except in the mining industry. Russians don't do that much business in Africa. I think they are there to do some military contracts, which I don't know much about.
Mm.
But as far as business is concerned, the Russians are not present yet. Now, the Turkish, they are doing some soft diplomacy, and they are building their footprints and across the continent. But they are mostly into infrastructure and exports to Africa, and they are not bringing to the same tune. They are not bringing their own nationals to work on the project that they have been assigned to.
So the Turks would hire local Africans to
Yes.
work to implement their projects.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that, of course, gives them the skills and the training so they can take their training elsewhere when there are other future projects from other companies.
Yes, I have like a good friend of mine. She represents the Turkish government in the furniture business and in Ghana. But if this were a Chinese business project, you will have seen that the Chinese will have expatriated one of their own and relocated them into Ghana to represent their interests. So this is the difference between China and the other foreign investors who come to Africa.
What is the perception of the Chinese among the African people? You said that there's a respect for American brands.
Yes.
But is there also, are people looking for bargains? For example, the Chinese build more than infrastructure. I believe, they're exporting their goods, their services as anything else, furniture, for example. Do the Chinese companies have the same reputation?
No, for two reasons. First of all, the China brand in Africa, because China has exported a lot of things to Africa, some of the things do not have the same quality as something you may import from the US, for instance. So the China brand, as far as exported goods, as far as finished goods are concerned, is not that highly valued or regarded by the African. Okay, so let's say if you bought like a cell phone from China and you bought one from the US, people value the one from the US better than the one from China. Okay, but as far as doing business with our governments, you have to face it. The government leaders from Africa sometimes they feel like they doing business with the US, you have to jump through so many hoops, and the US process is sometimes too bureaucratic. Whereas in China, the Chinese government, they are easy to deal with, according to a government official. And if you need a loan to build a road now, maybe it will take you 6 months to get that loan closed when you're dealing with a Chinese bank, China Exim Bank, as opposed to if you're dealing with the US Exim Bank, for instance. So I think that is what is creating the perception that Africa prefer China than the US. It's just in the procedure and the process. When somebody is in need of some cash infusion urgently, and you want them to wait for 2 or 3 years to go through the paperwork before you can approve it, the person will prefer the first person, the first business partner, China might, in this instance, who will come with the funding ready.
Right.
So that's what it create the confusion. It doesn't mean that Africa prefer China to the US, but it's just easier to do business with China sometimes than to do business with the US.
Very interesting. And just for our viewers, Komi mentioned the Exim Bank. Many countries have Exim banks. That stands for Export-Import banks, banks that finance infrastructure projects or large projects abroad. One of the other infrastructure barriers basically is electricity, that there's a shortage of electricity. And even though Africa has an abundance of solar resources, of course, connecting to the grid is very hard and very expensive, and therefore a lot of companies and individuals, perhaps, or individual factories have their own generators, and that of course pushes up the price of goods. How do you address that? How do you address that issue?
I will address that issue in the larger scheme of things when I say that Africa has what I define come a PMS problem. is poor management syndrome problem. That's how I define it. PMS, poor management syndrome. And if you take that concept and you look across industry, you realize that Africa does not have a lack. In some areas, Africa has even abundance, but it's the mismanagement which is creating the lack. This brings me to the electricity or the power sector, which I know very well because I have some large clients in that sector. Africa does not have a problem overall, a power generation problem, meaning it is a misconception that we do not produce enough electricity. That's why we have light of power off, for instance. In some countries, which I'm not going to give you any specific name for obvious reasons, they have over generation. I mean, they have over capacity of power. But it is the management of the transmission which is creating the problem. Right. Now, if you have, for instance, a history or a culture of poor maintenance of your transmission line, and then your transmission sectors break down like every other day, people will have the impression that there is not enough electricity to give it because people are always living under the constant power outage, which is not necessarily the case. It's because sometimes we can have enough power stored in the country, but the transmission line is a problem, the way we maintain it. Secondly, referring to my PMS arguments about every African, of most African institutions. When you are a power company, you sell electricity to people, and you cannot make the time, or you do not have a process in place to collect the revenue, you will have a problem. So that's a problem of revenue collection for the electricity that we sell to our people, to our citizens. And sometimes the government subsidizes the electricity, the power that goes to the poor. But you know, dealing with the government, I mean, sometimes they pay, sometimes they don't pay you. But the power companies need to have revenue to reinvest in their management. So we have to look at the power problem in Africa holistically. Yes, of course, in some remote area, there is need to increase power generation, and renewable energy, solar energy could help with that. But overall, especially in the capital, most of the time we have enough power. Is the mismanagement of the power company and of the electricity apparatus, which is creating the problem.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So the problem is both the transmission of the power as well as the revenue collection.
Yes.
From the bills, of course.
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's good to know that the supply is not the issue.
No, the supply is not always the issue. It could be the issue in some remote area and in some small countries, but for the big countries overall, the supply is not the issue. And there's something also that they call, to compound this situation, there's another problem that they call illegal connection, meaning there are some people who are connected to the national grid, but whose meters are not running, so they are not paying for the electricity that they are using. Now, if you compound all these problems, how could a power company make money to invest in new infrastructure to improve it? It is almost impossible. So that's the problem we're dealing with in Africa.
So if I were an American or a European power generation company and I
Yes.
wanted to invest in Africa,
Yes.
are you saying that I could still invest, but I would have to ensure that my practices are in keeping with Western standards?
Okay, so I like that. So yes, there is still a lot of opportunities in the power industry in Africa. But investors beware. Do not go to Africa, invest in a big electricity or a big power company or project if you do not know how the end-to-end, the value chain of the power generation and revenue collection is going to be managed. I will advise you to invest rather in the power and electricity advisory services so you can help these companies to know how to better run a power company. Then you can invest it. There's a lot of money to be made in the power in the power industry in Africa. There's a lot of money to be made, but do not go put your money in a rabbit hole and expecting magic to happen. You have to be part of the management. You have to bring some Western standards management structure to restructure, to shuffle things around before you put your money in.
That's fascinating also, wonderful insight. A related question about electricity, which is manufacturing. One of the problems and criticisms that Africans have, and they're totally justified, is that they export their raw materials, say, to Europe or the United States, and then they have to re-import the finished product.
Yes.
So, for example, furniture is a very easy example. I'm not sure it's the best example. They might export the wood, but they would import the finished furniture.
That's correct.
And the same way they might export cotton, for example, or cloth,
Yes.
but they import the clothes, the finished clothes.
Yes.
So, and I know that there are obviously better examples for much higher level. So batteries, for example, they might export the bauxite or whatever goes into batteries. I'm not familiar. And then they import the final finished batteries. So
Yes.
how much is the manufacturing center growing, or how much are the incentives growing to encourage the in-continent manufacturing instead of having to re-import it instead of having to re-import the final product?
Okay, it is changing now, so that is the good news. For instance, in countries like Togo and Benin, they have created some large industrial parks where they are starting to manufacture or to add value to their cotton. So there's value addition in the cotton industry, which is happening currently. So that's the good news. Now, overall, on the continent, let me take a step back and explain the genesis of this problem. When Africa was colonized by the Europeans, they built the local economy and the African economy as a raw material reservoir for their own industry. Okay. So everything, the railroads, the roads, everything was built so that they can extract and export. So after independence, our government, the first leaders, some of them, like our own Dr. Komi Klu, were really, really visionaries. In Ghana, Dr. Komi Klu was Ajifo, but they did not last. They did not last in power. So, but after those visionaries, we have had other leaders that came to the scene which did not have the same level of vision, which were not as Pan-Africanist or so focus on improving the African population living standard. So they continue the historical colonial economic process, which was extract and export so that we can get some revenue. So there was nothing done to do value addition or to do any manufacturing. And we have lived in that condition for more than 50 years. It's only now that Africa has a newer generation of leaders who are thinking differently. I mean, I can name them. I mean, the President Nana Addo from Ghana, President Paul Kagame from Rwanda. We have had a new breed of leaders who have come and said, no, enough is enough. We are going to start manufacturing our own things in Africa before we export it. I will give you a case study. In Botswana, they used to export a lot of diamond. Right. Diamond, it's a diamond-rich country. But they were exporting diamond and getting some, peanuts for it until the government decided that they are going to do the diamond refinery, the polishing, and the diamond cutting. They're going to do the value addition locally. Guess what? The big investor who understood the purpose of this change, this change of mindset, they invested in Botswana. Now Botswana has beautiful diamond processing centers where they have hired the local Botswana citizens. They have trained them, and they are doing the cutting, they are doing the refining, and they are building wealth within their own countries. And now Botswana is exporting finished diamond as opposed to the raw diamond. This is the shift all African countries have to embark on. Like I said, the country of Togo, they are now starting to manufacture their own cotton. In Benin, they are now starting to add value to their own cotton. In Ghana, President Nana Addo also has said that very soon Ghana will be adding value to the cocoa. Ghana is the #1 producer of cocoa, which is the raw material used to make chocolate. Right. But why should Ghana be exporting raw cocoa beans and then in return be importing chocolate at a high price? It does not make sense. Exactly. So this is the new shift that Africa is undergoing.
That's wonderfully encouraging. It's great news. Are countries offering incentives to foreign investors to set up these manufacturing plants, or is the initiative coming from the foreign investors with the ideas to do it themselves?
Oh, no, there are big incentives. I don't have the details here, but what they are doing is they're building what they call industrial parks.
Industrial parks, yes.
And if you invest in that scheme of industrial park, you get some tax break. You get a lot of incentive. Yes.
So are the industrial parks for specific purposes, such as cocoa processing in Ghana, in Ivory Coast, or and the diamond processing in Botswana? Or are the industrial parks general, like office parks in the United States, and you can do whatever business you would want to do there?
No, they are general. They are general. I mean, they are general. Now, of course, it has to fall within what the government calls the National Development Program. They call it PND, Programme de National de Développement in French. So you have to fall within the government's priorities. But if you have that, if that fall within the government's priority, yes, the industrial part will attract, will give you the opportunity and some tax breaks. Yes.
That's fascinating also. back a bit to the corruption question.
Yes.
One of the ways that corruption is done is to build in what are called consulting fees into the contract. So
Okay.
when the United States or any other government authority might audit an exporter's books, an American exporter's books, for example, and might
Okay.
see a consulting fee, is that a red flag that perhaps that's a bribe, or is that often legitimate for whatever purpose, other purpose?
No, consulting fees cannot just from the get-go be considered as a bribe. Now, I know what you're talking about, and I know that some politicians, even in France, they have done it. Some politicians have hired their own wife, called the consulting fees. Yeah, I know that's a practice. But the auditor needed to understand the culture and the business culture, and they will need to go behind the scene to really understand if you're billing me consulting fees for, let's say, 500,000. What did we get for it? For instance, now when I visit some of my clients, for instance, and they told me that they have had consulting, some big name consulting have done some work for them, and I asked them to show me the finished product, like what is the final consulting report that the consultant has given you. Now, if you cannot get that document, the final product, and you cannot see that, like, invoices signed and approved by the proper authorities, then you know there's something fishy happening there. But we cannot just say that all consulting fees or all consulting invoices are a source of corruption. No, but yes, some have used them just to hide some, some malpractice, if I can call it like that.
Yeah, that's encouraging also. Thank you. Tell me a bit about cultural issues.
Okay.
There are obviously many cultural differences between countries. Can you give us some examples first of African etiquette when an investor goes in or a business person goes there to the continent? What should the person do or expect? And then secondly, differences between countries.
Okay. So, for instance, we Americans, we are really transactional in our mindset.
Right.
You get off the plane, they pick you up at the airport. Once you get in the car of your host, you start discussing business.
Right.
Oh, did you get my email? Oh, did you review the contract? Oh, where can I get it? Can I sign it in the car? No. That's not how we Africans we do business. Okay. Now, Africans are more relational. They want to get to know you. They want to get to know you. Probably when you get to the airport, they'll pick you up. Maybe that afternoon, you may not conduct any business. Maybe they will take you to a dinner. Maybe they'll invite you to their house. You get to know their wives, or you get to know the family. And then once they build the level of trust, then they can start doing business with you, maybe the following day. So I know in the US, we say that time is money. Yes, time is money, I agree. But other countries don't put the same value on time like the way we do. I'm not saying that we should not respect our time, but I'm just saying we should respect the way people approach things. So when you walk into the room, you are sitting at a dinner table, for instance. In Africa, we still respect authorities, and by authorities, the authority could be conferred to you. The authority can be conferred on you by way of your title in the company
Mm.
or by way of your seniority. We respect our elders.
Right.
So especially if you are dealing with a family-held business, for instance, maybe the younger son will be the CEO, but if the founder of the company is around, you guys are attending a dinner with that family, you as the American, you need to be careful. Don't start eating before before they tell you to start eating. Usually the elder will start eating or will say a little prayer, whether you believe in God or not. That's their culture. You have to respect them. They are going to say prayer before they start eating, for instance. Second, almost every business meetings in Ghana start with a prayer, whether you like it or not. So you have to be prepared for that. They start with a prayer, and then you see African when they see somebody in authority and or older than them, most of the time when they are greeting you, some may bow down to greet you. It's a sign of respect. And when you go to uh, to the royalties, you go to like the kings or the chiefs. No matter who you are, you have to bow down. Let me share a story with you. I think it was last year, the U.S. ambassador in Ghana went to visit the king, the Ashanti king in Kumasi in Ghana. He was made to wait, which maybe he was not used to, and they asked him to take off his shoes before he was in the presence of the king. So this could offend you, but you have to be. I mean, the ambassador was prepared for that. Maybe he knows what he was doing. So
That's encouraging.
so yeah. So he did what he was supposed to do. But you imagine you take your tech investor, VC company from Silicon Valley. You brought him to Ghana, and you imagine you bring Elon Musk to one of these guys, and you ask Elon Musk to take off his shoes. Maybe he'll start sending some tweets. He'll be sending tweets and saying something bad. But that's how it is. We need to be aware of the culture and respect the local culture. That's the only way you can be successful.
Well, that's true in any country, but you're absolutely
Yes.
right. It's encouraging because I have gray hair, so it's very encouraging that I could easily do business in Africa.
Oh yeah, they'll respect you. They'll show you respect.
Yes, because I'm officially old, and I
Yes.
as well. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
This concept of, and you put it you expressed it extremely well, relational versus transactional business practices.
Yes.
This is very common in most of the world, actually. Americans don't appreciate, but many of our guests have said this, and I've tried to emphasize this in other podcasts, that it's really important to establish the relationship of trust, of value, of mutual respect, I think,
Yes.
before you even think of doing business.
Yes.
And don't just plunge in, as you're saying, but
Yes.
obviously take the time to talk to people, get to know them, their families, what's important to them, and so forth, before you plunge in and do some transaction, because that obviously does not work.
It's very important. Yes.
What about differences or similarities between countries, between, say, West African cultures versus East African cultures or Central African? Are there, can you speak to that?
Yes. There are differences, but for the most part, they are similar. What I say now, we Africans, we can identify the subtle differences between West Africa and East Africa, for instance.
Mm.
But overall, for a foreigner, I think you'll go crazy because Africa has 54 countries.
Right.
You'll go crazy if you want to just have your notebook and think about, oh, when I go to Ghana, this is what I do. Mostly, there are more similarities than differences.
Yes.
Between the countries. Now, for instance, when you go to Nigeria, for instance, and I think the Nigerians are a little more aggressive. The Nigerians are the typical Americans in Africa. They are business minded. They don't like to waste time. So that's the difference between a Nigerian and a Ghanaian business person.
Huh.
So an American investor who is on the go, on the go. When they get to Nigeria, they will feel more comfortable doing business in Nigeria, as opposed to the Ghanaian. The Ghanaian will slow you down a little bit. And the biggest another difference is between the Anglophone and the Francophone countries in Africa. The Anglophones overall.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt you for a moment. For our listeners who don't know, Anglophone means English speaking, and Francophone means French speaking. And the word Lusophone, L-U-S-O phone, P-H-O-N-E, means Portuguese speaking.
Yes. Okay. So for the English speaking Africa versus the French speaking Africa, the English speaking Africa, the Anglophones are more business minded. They are more closer to the American transactional mindset. The Francophone, to the contrary, though they like business, they are more bureaucratic. They like a lot of administration, a lot of paperwork. So something that you can get done in the Anglophone country in 2 days, it could take you 2 weeks to get it done in the Francophone country. But overall, let me qualify this by saying that thanks to technology, things are changing across Africa. But you will see this difference in culture once you move from an English speaking to a French speaking African country.
It's very encouraging. And I'm laughing because France, of course, has a reputation of being very bureaucratic and forms for everything, stamps.
Exactly.
Yes, and of course the Africans learned it from the French colonists.
Yes.
Africa has various economic communities, shall we say.
Yes.
There's ECOWAS, which is the Economic Community of West African States.
Yes.
SADC, the Southern Africa Development Community.
Yes.
COMESA, the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, and so forth. Have you found that these groupings are beneficial? Are they actually helping to increase the African economies, or are they organizations in name only?
No. Okay. Now, these are very efficient economic organizations, and they are helping also on the commerce, inter-commerce also. So the one I know the most is ECOWAS from West Africa. Currently, in Africa, the African Union talk about free movement of people and goods, but it just exists on paper. If you're an African, you're Ghanaian, you want to travel to Cameroon and to Central Republic of Africa, you have to wait for so many days to get a visa to go there. Wow. However, within the ECOWAS 15 countries with your national passports, and sometimes even with your national ID, like your driver's license that we have in the US. You can travel across all 15 countries. That's a success story. You can move your goods, you can travel across all the 15 countries. That's a success story. And there is a free movement of goods also, but that one is only on paper. Reality is something different. ECOWAS has a free movement of goods and of people. For the people side, they have successfully done it. For the good side, normally you should take your goods, you should be able to take your goods from Ivory Coast and go to Lagos, Nigeria, without anybody, driving you crazy. But reality is something different.
Right.
Currently, it's very hard for you to do that seamlessly. So that's the challenge. But the idea is good. The implementation is a little hesitant. But these are good organizations that we need to encourage. They just need to improve. They need to get their act together.
That is very encouraging, at least the free movement of people. Does that mean for visiting only, or within for the labor market as well? Because a lot of these countries have tremendous unemployment, so they may not want the foreigners coming in from other community members.
Yeah, no. This is not for employment. This is just for labor and to do business. Like you see, in Africa, I think like 85% of our economy is in what we call the informal sector.
Right.
So most people do trade, cross-border trades. So you can take your goods from Ghana, from Ivory Coast, and go sell it in Lagos and come back. But this does not give you the right to settle there and become a foreign worker there. You have to go through their local rules and laws for a foreigner to work in that country. Yes.
Very interesting. So it's basically a temporary, let's say, for example, a 10-day pass to go sell your goods and then come back.
Yes. Yes. I think it goes up to 90 days.
90 days. Right.
Yes.
Well, that's even better.
Yes.
Not necessarily, but not the right to work, not the right to work and settle.
No, not the right to engage in formal employment.
Formal employment. Yes.
Yes, because remember, our economies are informal. So if you take your goods from Lagos and you go to Ivory Coast, you start selling them on the side of the street. Nobody's going to tell you that you're a foreigner, you cannot sell. So it's formal employment. That's what we're talking about. That's the difference.
And formal employment, for, again, the benefit of our listeners, means you're employed by an actual company that pays your salary, may pay you benefits, vacation time, the rest of it. Informal are people who set up, as you said, on the road in kiosks and booths, selling, whether it's candy or shampoo or goods or clothing, whatever. That's more informal. There's no corporate structure to it. Is that right?
And let me add something there. So what this is doing for our audience, if you're an American investor, you invest in Ghana or you invest in any other countries within the ECOWAS, your goods is not for the Ghanaian population alone. Your goods are being produced for 300 million or maybe now 400 million people of the ECOWAS market. I mean, Nigeria alone is over 200 million people.
I'm sorry, what's 200 million?
I say Nigeria alone has a population of over 200 million. So
and ECOWAS has about 400 million.
Yes.
And ECOWAS, again, is the Economic Community of West African States.
Yes.
It's very encouraging. It's great. One of the ways that FDI, foreign direct investors, in this case, need to know is how to reconfigure products for the African markets.
Yes.
So, for example, In the United States, we have Costco. You buy these enormous packages of toilet paper and dish detergent and whatever it is that can last you at least 10 weeks or 10 months if you've got a small family. And of course, you have to have a very big storage room in your house to put it there. Most Africans, they may not have big houses, of course, but the issue is that they may not have the money to pay for very large quantities. So it used to be, and I presume it still is true, for example, that a shampoo manufacturer, instead of selling a huge bottle of shampoo as one would do in the United States, you sell a little sachet, a little packet of shampoo that may last a day or two.
Yes.
And it may cost 5 cents.
Yes.
People can afford 5 cents. They can't afford $5. Is this still the case, that this is one of the ways that manufacturers have to scale their products?
Yes. So this is a very good example. So any manufacturer who goes into a new market needs to know the ways of the markets. So this is a very good example for the shampoo. For instance, I'll give you another example for milk. Like milk, like powdered milk or canned milk. So what they do in Africa is, if you don't have money to buy the whole can of milk, they're putting the milk now in a small sachet that you can buy for maybe 10 cents. That one, everybody can afford it, as opposed to only the rich who can afford the can. So the manufacturer who comes to Africa need to ask themselves the question: am I building my products for the masses, or am I building it just for the few 1 or 2% who can afford it? If you can conclusively answer that question for yourself, then we can help you in whichever direction you want to go in. But my advice for you is, no matter what you're building, or no matter what you are manufacturing, if you manufacture it and sell it to the masses, you have more money. I mean, we have big companies like Nestle. Nestle is making, they're making profit like every year in Africa. We have Kentucky Fried Chicken in Africa. They all have come to Africa, have known the African way, and have adapted their product to the needs of the market, which is what everybody needs to do.
That's absolutely true in any market, but that's a wonderful example. There's also the wonderful example of Gerber. Are you familiar with that story?
Yeah. No, I don't know the story, but I know the company.
Yes. So Gerber came to Africa. I think it may have been in Ethiopia. I don't remember.
Okay.
And traditionally in Africa, until perhaps recently, most people didn't know how to read or didn't have a high standard of literacy. And it's still the case in many countries or many rural areas, whatever. So therefore, manufacturers put on the label a picture of what's inside the can or what's inside the packet. So of course, Gerber came to Africa and had on the label, as they did in the United States and Europe, the pretty white baby, which meant, of course, that the product was puree of white baby. And, obviously, it didn't sell very well. So they then had to redesign the product or redesign the label so that it was very clear what was inside.
That's very good. That's a good example. Yeah.
In what other ways do companies need to reconfigure their products, perhaps by color, by design? Pricing is the example that you also mentioned. Are there other ways that people should know about serving the masses, the African masses?
Yeah, by design also, but I would say by the business interaction, like we call it customer experience, by adopting the customer experience. For instance, if you go to Africa and you want to create a power grid, like a renewable energy power grid, for instance, because of the economic conditions in the country, I would advise you not to not to build a power grid where you sell power to people and bill them at the end of the month.
Mm.
I'll advise you to do a prepaid system, for instance. So before you can use the power, you go, they have a card, some magnetic cards. You go, you buy the amount of power that you can afford that week.
Mm.
And then you go, you come, you put it in your meter, then you use that power for that week. Maybe you don't have enough money. So at the end of the week, if your power finishes, maybe you can leave like 2 more days without power until you get paid again. Then you come and buy more power.
And you put this on a card, did you say?
Yeah, it's like a credit card.
Like a credit card.
Like a credit card.
Prepaid
so
card.
Yes, prepaid card. So you come to the power generator's office.
Right.
You say, I want to buy for $10.
Right.
They put power $10 in it. You come, you put it in your meter. Your meter read it, and we call it cash power. Your meter reads it, and your meter gives you power for $10. When it finishes, when you have money, you come and buy more. As opposed to your competitor, who will be generating power, be selling the power to people's home, and figuring out the time to bill them. Now the postal system is not that reliable, so you send the bill, they say, I have not received the bill.
Right.
So and then waiting for them now to come to the office and pay the bill. You see how much, you see how many things can go wrong in that process?
Of course.
So the prepaid power system is a good example of somebody adopting the service, a vital service, to the needs of the people. And it is working.
And it's amazing that more power companies don't do that. It seems so obvious.
Exactly.
When I used to work in Africa, there was one paycheck at the end of the month, as opposed to say bi-weekly or semi-weekly in the United States. Is that still the case, that people are paid monthly?
Yes, and that is another area of challenge, of poor underperformance in Africa, in African business. Let me explain. When they hire you, they promise you a salary, let's say $1,000 at the end of the month. So you know that no matter what your performance is, and no matter how many hours you actually work, I say actually work, your guarantee is like some type of entitlement mentality, which we Africans have to change. We have to adopt maybe a hybrid of the Africans guarantee salary and the American paid for performance method, because that guarantee salary has created lazy, underperforming people in African administration, especially in the government offices. People come to work, they say it's a government job, nobody is going to ever fire me, I'll be there for 30 years, but then I'll retire. So they do not perform. That's a big challenge for African countries. We need to change it.
And I believe the same is true among the teaching sector.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Fascinating point.
Yeah.
Tell me about your humanitarian initiatives.
Okay.
What do you do, or what does your company do?
Okay. What I do personally, and then I'll tell you about what my company does. What I do personally is, because I'm a Christian, I work with a lot of Christian organizations, and we go to Africa and we help them with their basic needs, for instance, clean water and healthcare. And then if they need maybe some church building to be built, we can help them with that, but we do not put the basic need, we do not put the church building before their basic needs, because we believe that you need to take care of the people's immediate needs before you start working on the spiritual one. So that's what we do. Yeah, I belong to a church based in Middle Smithfield Presbyterian, in Middle Smithfield in Eastern Pennsylvania in the Poconos.
Oh,
Yeah. So I used to be the director of outreach. So I'm still connected with them, and we're still doing a lot of things in Africa. Now, my organization, it is our policy to give back to the community. But we do not want to give back to the community in the areas of just financial assistance, where the people will take the money and they will just spend the money and come back for more. I believe in teaching the people how to fish as opposed to giving them the fish. So every year, my organization find a different women economic economic cooperative that we give a grant to, in order for them to just put that money into good use, so that they can build something for themselves and then empower their group. And by so doing, the income that they are getting from it will trickle down to their family, to other members of their group. So that's what my company does. Every year we give a grant to a women cooperative or women economic group, whether they are traders, they want to make juice, whatever they do, we give them grants.
you give them grants?
Yeah, give them grants.
It sounds like microfinance.
Yeah, but yes, but this is a gift. We don't want, it's a grant. We don't need them to pay it back.
Yeah.
They need to report to us that they are making progress, and we help them with like training, coaching, advisory. But this is a grant. This is a gift. We don't want it back.
That's truly wonderful and very generous.
Yeah.
And of course, humanitarian. It's excellent.
Yes. Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we close?
No, the only thing I want to share is, look, as I have told you about my where I was born, I was privileged to go to school in France, in the US. So I feel personally that I'm a blessed person. I have been blessed. I don't take anything I have for granted. So because I have been blessed so much, it is my desire and my duty, I would say, to help others. So my business model is to find a need and bring a solution to the needs. Whether the need is in Africa, somebody needs some advisory or some coaching to improve their business, I'm there. Or the need is in the US, somebody wants to invest in Africa, or somebody is thinking about doing business in Africa, but does not know how to do it, I'm there. So what I'm offering is just helping people be successful, helping people solve their problem. While doing that, if I can make money, that's good. But money is not what I'm looking for in the beginning. My purpose is to helping people like the way other people have helped me reach where I am today. It is my duty to help other people be successful. That's what I have to say.
That is wonderful. What a wonderful upbeat note to close on. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the honor, for the opportunity.
This has been a wonderful talk with Dr. Komi Klu, and his contact information can be found on our Global Gurus website, on the episode on our Global Gurus website. Thank you so much, Komi. It's been a
Thank you, Philip.
speaking with you.
Thank you. Nice speaking with you. Bye.